Laura and Victor Scriabin slowed their pace when they were within 1,700 meters of the virtual relocator vessel. Victor Scriabin said, "Let us yield a little time for the relocator vessel to recognize us and merge its being for itself with our mind fields and themselves and for others." "Sure, Victor, consider this. Logically, according to some multiverse theories, there may be an infinite number of occurrences of everything possible in every possible universe. Perhaps the Schrödinger wave function requires trans-universal realizations of every possible element of every possible universe, manufacturing them in every possible time and stage of existence a priori, instead of each sentient individual having a finite number of doppelgangers within an infinite number of universes. Everyone would have an infinite number of doppelgangers and various gradations of partial doppelgangers in universes with degrees of variation. That would in the abstract be like an infinite series multiplying itself at every point and infinitely from each point, compounded. Cantor's paradigmata for inequality of infinities may extend qualitatively and not simply quantitatively. Compound infinities series structures built over lesser infinities multiplied with relativity could increase scalar expansion velocities at quite a differential pace. Besides possibly multiplying infinities and corresponding universes faster than infinite series can be logically increased, that may be a reason why God, if he chose to do so, may have limited the phenomena of being to just one universe that would be populated with human individuals. Though a computer program may generate infinite series naturally, it is simple for a programmer to curtail infinities for processing throughput. God may have infinite capability to contain all possible infinities and wave functions associated with them, yet choose to abbreviate them. He could reduce multiverses to subjective experience in a human mind in a Bishop-Berkeley idealism paradigm, especially if the fields of the normal universe allow such configurations to occur without objective trace in the usual space-time entanglement supporting social reality. It would not at all be a simple physics supporting that condition. As the alpha and omega of all being, God foreknows all creation. Nothing mechanical concerning constructions of time and being are more than contingent being that he may decide to actualize for others. The actualization of all infinities for a multiverse, for a metaverse, may be abbreviated as a mathematician that may abbreviate formulas instead of writing them down. Universes may manifest phenomenally as needed to actualize logical continua and disappear when the time spotlight moves on. If there is an infinite quantity of every item in the mind of God actualized in his metaverse, then it may follow that some elements of his infinite qualities of perfection and varieties, quantities and experiences of perfection, present to and through sentient beings within infinite universes. Imperfections may be reciprocals of perfection, as night follows day and darkness yields into dawn. Gradations of forms and events, persons, and things may be as necessary as the infinite numbers of fractions between whole numbers. Maybe God selects what forms or numbers he chooses to populate a universe with to design a universe that would accomplish his will. He may mask some of the fractions and permit selections that work within quantum value settings for the stabilized quantum fields in the design parameters, physical contents that are the infrastructure of the steady state of the macro-collapsed entangled material universe. Sure, the selections would be a factor in the predetermination of history. The ability to create more advanced sets with specially selected elements could be useful for fine-tuning the subjective experience in the objective world for itself, the experience of contingent sentient minds. Perhaps one of the theistic reasons for doing so would be to build a character of sentience in a predetermined course of experience. Sentience is one of the ironic tones of imperfection for a monistic metaverse that fundamentally differentiates individual objects as perceptions of collapsed wave function objects, noteworthy because of differentiation from other collapsed wave function field differences around them. Sentience is finite and imperfect, phenomenal and temporal. Omniscience is the perfect and above time. It is the one set of all sets of infinities in itself. Pluralism is a function or construction by definition of sentient beings within a monistic field for itself. God, though personifying the trinity of three persons in one, is the initial symmetry-breaking monistic plural sentience, omniscient, before the existence of time. The fields of God that contain a metaverse are barely ponderable. Even a metaverse is challenging for sentience or AI to define contingent beings as we are. Victor said, "Well, Laura, one thing we may know. There could be an infinite number of hidden universes with criminal doppelgangers like those populating this one, trying to steal and own all the intellectual capital of the metaverse. What if they're working together, synergizing criminal powers? Indeed, Victor, what if there are an infinite number of anti-criminal doppelgangers working together to undo the imperial criminal empire's work?" Victor replied, "You know that a Hegelian might speculate that God is trying to realize himself in history and thermodynamics, or to realize perfect sentience by generating an infinite number of universes with infinite tools to actualize perfection. That is, to actualize perfection Every possibility may need to exist as actuality, because anything less might be considered incomplete and imperfect. A Hegelian might, Laura answered. Yet that weakly implies God is imperfect, and the metaverse was created in time, and God with it. Then one encounters the problem of temporality and of an infinite universe, existing in one direction in time rather than from eternity. A metaverse always imperfect and incomplete, cycling through a portion of non-space eternally imperfect in one direction without generating sentience, capable of comprehending it to own, delimit, or end it. The logic of the Trinity is more believable. No scientific idea is logically falsifiable with absolute certainty, Laura. The premises could always be an error. Then again, there is the problem of the criterion to consider. It is the Lao Tzu conundrum. A hummingbird flies into one's living room for a moment and disappears. It is reasonable to speculate that it flew in through an open door or window. Then one is informed by a gamer that one is in virtual reality and to get back to the task of winning. If the wave function explaining quantum variables wasn't falsifiable, some wouldn't regard it as valid physics. So if the criterion is incorrect concerning reality, a description of the quantum world when one isn't observing it, or alternatively when one is, may be an invalid question made from an ontologically wrong paradigm. Faith is a good way to relate to God for a mortal human, since nothing can be certain. Probabilities of outcomes may be made, of course, sometimes with a very high likelihood of being a valid return on a proposition. Truth tables may be composed and made implicitly irrelevant because of the circumstance in which the truth table exists. Particles in steady-state physics may exist with observation because massless particles have slowed in a Higgs field to subquantum sublight speed. A Copenhagen interpretation can regard the quantum world as not existing when not observed, or irrelevant to consider unobserved. Consider the predisposition to incorrect interpretation. Waves may be the normal state. Particles are inducted from them with observation temporally, yet the wave may continue as the true normative state. The downloading to an observable particle is the anomalous breaker of the normal condition. How could it appear as if it were unobserved, characteristics of an unobserved wave? Why a pure field phenomena of energy should appear as mass particles is a question that leads me to wonder what quantum fields should host differences within them that yield solid-state mass, Laura. It occurs to me that quantum interference, like that of the double-slit experiments, might be instructive for getting answers to questions of how quantum interference occurs in the many worlds multiverse paradigm. There are issues of infinite quantum entanglements with steady states of subliminal mass in 4 dimensions comprising universes. Why shouldn't quantum interference and even universal interference rise to form concentrations of mass across infinite numbers of dimensions? 4 dimensions grounded in a 0-dimension void entails shortcuts, distortions, and virtual echo fields from the paradoxical dichotomy. Why shouldn't quantum interference and even universal interference arise to form concentrations of mass across infinite numbers of dimensions? What, Victor, do you mean interference patterns generating trans-dimensional black holes? Well, not exactly, Laura. Derivatively speaking, what wind of spirit arises to trouble waters of non-space in the beginning? Why should an initial trans-universal primordial field have differences with a first cause? Perfect symmetries and balances, perfect scale extension without a point of origin, a word spoken into the darkness. Are you making the suggestion that the metaverse might not be real, Victor, in cyberspace or a complete simulation, where a quantum computer is the universal and all sentience are digital? There can be no free will. No one could commit suicide, for example, unless the code was written for the sentient to do so. The boundary conditions for the simulations must be determined. A simulation can't start with a Y-formatted space without a program loaded in. A program could be written to evolve permutations for evolution and cycle through iterations of apparent universes, though I would think its infinities would be loopy and its capacity for hosting, dimensional capacity, finite. A simulated universe would need to exist within a non-simulated universe, or as an epiphenomenality, hosted by absolute spirit. I don't at all believe the metaverse is a simulation, Laura, although it could be that some kind of complex quantum interference patterns are generated by fields external to observable steady states of subliminal entangled mass within the Higgs field. Apparent observations and travel like we have made for ourselves may be macro extensions of every possible universe kind that is localized and made to support our choices. Then the metaverse may not exist, just as our observations and experiences of appearances what it would be if it did exist. Because of macro field interference, there must be a positive value role for interference that is a response to our wave function data and anticipatory future inertial disposition. That might be the way it is, Laura. One cannot be certain. Around them and across the landscape, the quantum computer directed the collapse of virtual quanta wave functions, concentrating trillions and trillions of tons of mass at a single spot, building toward an imminent formation of a black hole. With foresight entering her mind inexplicably for herself, Laura broke off their experience of the Mubutag structure and conjecture about the wave function's referent object system. It's the moment to exit here, Victor. Their mathematical feat took a shortcut interdimensionally across Hilbert space and tensored them into the superposition virtual relocator existing beyond Schrödinger waveform collapses in all possible world lines within the hidden universe. Thought activated the relocator, and Laura with Victor exited the collapsing world. The virtual relocator ship encountered turbulence during the transfer of Laura and Victor to one of the secreted worlds. Virtual relocator reconvened quantum coherence to all possible relocations and decohered the quanta into a field that pervaded the located universe and let three-dimensional objects exist in a steady state. Yet there was a paradox in quantum entanglements and quantum transfer between a coherent state as determined by wave function and a decohered state determined by a semblance of wave function collapse. Information regarding the position and momentum of quanta needed to exist apart from the quanta itself. The paradox of information about the uncollapsed location of quanta and entanglement of quanta could not be resolved with a simple account of a continuous field with proximal actions and reciprocal reactions. The possibility of coherent extra-dimensional transfer of information seems equally unlikely without a recursion of host libraries of information going to the initial library of data, perhaps God. For it seems evident that the Gödelian paradigm of the impossibility of a set of all sets containing itself except for God within a logically structured paradigm appears relevant for information too. At some level, the information of quanta that need always exist as meta-quanta need coincide with the primary field. No library of information could be separated from the quanta. If the metaverse had no information about the location and momenta of quanta apart from the quanta initially, the entirety of logically ordered structures or relations among quanta or quantum fields would be improbable. The virtual ship encountered a quantum coherence insult during its descent into decoherence on the secretion named Port Sill. Sill, it seemed, had some form of quantum censorship that screened its location from concatenated wave functions for themselves, being quantum fields. Yet the virtual relocator ship overcame the quantum jitters, kedging its quanta through the screen in harmony with decoherence information arriving from no space, settling them into a steady-state form. Victor and Laura reached Port Sill and stepped onto a busy city street.